Thank you. So, let me just make sure this works. Great. So, I want to talk about the React Native Playground and about React Native, but mainly I want to leave two things in your head today and start a conversation, not give a speech, but start a conversation about play and experimentation, because I think this is a really important thing in the kind of work that we do. In fact, two things, play and speed, development speed. I think these are two things that we have to constantly be thinking about and focusing on whenever we can with the kind of work that we do. Because I think, you know, the work we do really allows us to change the world. And I know how that sounds. I'm not talking about Google, Facebook change the world, but just dropping this little drop of water and seeing the ripple effect go out and then come back to us in unexpected ways. This is what happened in our experience building the React Native Playground. And that's something I want you all to kind of feel, if I can express myself well, feel what we felt while we were building it. A brief side, it's 1996. Anyone know what this is? Anyone seen this before? Or at least something like this? Okay. This is my first web design. And we'll come back to this later and see exactly. I won't tell you now what it has to do with the React Native, but there is a relation. I did want to ask, how many of you actually have played with React Native so far? Okay, so a good amount, cool. And the React Native Playground, how many of you have actually used it or seen it? Well, not so many, so that's good. That means we're going to get you all excited about it today. So, yeah, we'll come back to this one. Okay, see on this guy. In April 27, 2015, React Native just come out, and we were all on chat talking about the possibility of getting sort of like a JS fiddle type experience. Should be super easy to write, said Christopher. Didn't turn out to be super easy, but you know, this was just this crazy idea. It was an experiment. It wasn't commissioned by Facebook or by anyone. It was just an idea that we had of something fun to play around with. And you know, how would we do this? How does React Native work and make something like this possible? The core concept, it's important to know, is we're executing JavaScript in a native environment. But that means we can load that JavaScript from anywhere, even a URL. So our first idea was to load this URL from a QR code on an app running on a phone. That still meant you had to compile this app on your phone. You still had to have a Mac, an iPhone. But we got this to work, managed to load a React Native app inside of another app on a phone. This is really cool. Like, this was never possible before. But you know, we had this dream that we just wanted everything to load, just have one URL you could send out to anyone, just like with JS Fiddle or the web in 1996. Just send out a URL and be able to test a mobile app. You know, this also is something that hasn't been possible yet. So fast forward to today, and this is the React Native Playground. So we're going to see a little example of how this works. This is a game built by Alexander Nosov. I don't know if he's here. If you are, thank you for building this, this cross-platform example. This is a code editor we have on the site. And you can see over here we have some files for the Android and iOS versions of this. So now we're loading the app here in a simulator running on the web. We can play around with it, experiment, and we can do it on iOS as well. Both of these simulators are running right there on the web. So this is not a web view or anything like that. This is an actual mobile simulator. And you can see here, this is the same code for both iOS and Android. So we can also go back to our old QR code and run this. This is my iPhone right here. Scan the code, and you can run this same app right there on our device and get that native behavior. Pretty cool, no? So this is, you know, what we were imagining, and it happened. So I just wanted to bring this quote out from a friend of mine who's said this a lot, and something that stuck in my head all the time. It's really important it's really related to what we're talking about here today. And that's the inspiration that we have to build things, to get things out there in the world is perishable. It has an expiration date. So it's really important that we have tools that allow us to play around and also get things out there as quick as possible. I think this is something that we really should be focusing on. For example, one of the biggest contributors for examples on the React Native Playground is a guy named Jason Brown, who, when he started out playing around with React Native, he didn't have a Mac or an iPhone, which is what you needed to play around with React Native. And what does that mean? That means you're cutting out a huge number of developers who only have a little bit of time to play around, and maybe their inspiration runs out, they have to go back to work, back to life, and they're never going to contribute to this community. But in this case, he found the playground, and he learned how to build React Native apps here. And now he's one of the biggest contributors of really cool examples of things like this, which this is like an Instagram filter type app. Let's see how to get this thing running. Okay, I think it actually is playing here. So we're changing a value here. Can't really see this, we're changing a value here, and the simulator over here is loading in real time the changes that we're making. So I wanted to show an example of how that actually is possible using the playground. So we can play around, experiment with this code, we can fork it, we can make changes and play around with it there in the simulator. And it's really cool that this guy, maybe if he hadn't found this tool, he wouldn't be doing React Native today. So this guy on the right here, had this idea to get these simulators working on this site. But you know, this wasn't, we didn't build that simulator. This is an extremely complex technology to make work. And Brent here is going to be giving a great talk later today. Don't miss it if you're interested in React Native. He just said, hey, let's just write these guys, have this online simulator, and see if they give it to us for free. And I said, no, sure, why not? That's probably, I was thinking, no, that's not going to happen. No, we'll just use the phones. And we wrote, and the next day they wrote back, said, yeah, let's do it. We love React Native. We want to be part of the community. You know, this is, again, just getting stuff out there and showing it to people, gets people excited and gets all these ripple effects that go out and then come back in unexpected ways. And this really made the playground possible, what we have today. So I want to shout out for these guys. It's a really cool product that they have, and you should check it out. It's great for doing product demos, anything you want with mobile, you can do on the web. I'm not going to cover this too much. I just wanted to reiterate that the way that React Native works is there's a bridge between the native environment on Android and iOS and a JavaScript execution environment. And the transfer of code between these two can happen over many channels, including over the internet, which is how the React Native Playground works. I'm going to try to explain here this crazy diagram of how this works, and this was kind of an insane idea, but again, just trying an insane idea and seeing that it actually works better than you expected is a great way to get stuff out there in the world. So what we do to make the playground work is we build a native React Native app which is just full of community modules for accessing the camera, GPS, maps, things that actually make using native apps more fun. And we host them on Apple-sized servers, which are actually Macs and Linux boxes running out there in the cloud. And they send a JPEG image stream to the browser, and then in the browser, actually on their servers, we pass in a URL to the JavaScript React Native packager that's running on our servers. So let me explain a little bit what that means. That means that on our server here, in this little tree of applications, we're running a single development node server that watches for changes in all of the files in the apps and pushes them back down to the browser, which allows us to update the app in real time. And this is kind of crazy that this actually works, because this was not designed for this. This packager is the thing that you run in development when you're developing apps. And we're running this in a production environment on a service, probably using 3 or 4 gigs of memory, and it's actually working great for this purpose. This isn't a long-term solution, but it was good enough to get it out there and be really useful to a lot of people. Some examples of how the playground is become really useful is in things like pull requests for React Native. It's used quite a lot in pull requests to actually observe behavior with bugs and issues. But also we had this idea that we could embed directly in the React Native documentation. And we've done this. We just have one example working now, but we want to get them all out there. If you guys can help out with that, please let me know. But now right there in the documentation, you can just click on the simulator and you can run one of the official examples. And you can see here, this is the alert iOS component that just works right there in the browser. So we want to keep doing more things like the experiments, getting stuff out there. Talk a little bit about the future of what the playground is going to do, hopefully, and I want you guys to help us out with this. We'd like to host official native modules. So the native modules that are out there have examples, but it's also, again, to get that onto your machine and compile it and test out those examples takes up time that you could be using to actually develop stuff. So we'd like to host all of these modules, official examples, and have them updated regularly. So this is something that, again, if you want to help out with, let us know. Someone told me this morning they're using the playground to do workshops and tutorials. Some of the workshops that were happening here at this conference, I was told that while some people were downloading the Android SDK, other people were developing apps and finishing their workshop on the playground. So again, development speed is a crucial thing in so many different environments. Another interesting thing about something like the playground is that you can, now that you can have mobile apps online and sort of distribute them this way without putting them on an app store or having some other kind of distribution system, you can get feedback much quicker than you would in the traditional mobile development environment. So this is an idea that we had to extend the playground into a product that would allow us to do QA and staging of React Native applications. But of course, you know, this seemed like quite an ambitious project, but again, React Native's architecture is really made in such a way that we built a prototype of this only in a couple of weeks using another technique, which is something that seemed kind of a crazy idea, but it actually works pretty well. So a React Native app is just a giant component, right? And at this top level component, we can actually wrap this component in another component which has its own behavior. So for example, if we want to give feedback on an app and put a sort of an annotator screenshot on top of this app, we can do this by injecting code on our server. So when somebody gives us one of their React Native apps, we can build its JavaScript and inject another component around their application, giving us all this behavior without the developer having even think about this. Another thing that before was pretty much impossible to do. I just wanted to give a quick demo of what we're doing here. On this product we have, we can select multiple devices, and we can rotate as well, something we're not doing yet on the playground, but also we do want to get in place. And we can do something like this, where we take a screenshot and leave feedback right here in this environment. Something that's missing from the playground, this extra step of being able to get feedback from QA teams and so on. And then we can view this feedback here, pass it on to a boss or a customer, and really close this loop and make development faster. And in the native environment, we actually shared a lot of this code and made it work almost the same way right here on the iPhone, with a very minimal effort using this same technique, which was only made possible because of the React Native architecture. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that a lot of this stuff was built very quickly by a very small team of people who were really enthusiastic about this because it was new and fun, and it was an experiment. It wasn't the same old thing. So I encourage all of you to bring out as much of this energy as you have and as much time as you can to put into these kinds of projects that aren't not just improving open source libraries and things like that, which of course is extremely important work, but also spreading out a little bit and thinking in how you can hack things up and make them work in different ways. I said I would come back to this. You know, the reason I brought this up was, you know, I built this site not having any idea what I was doing back then, and kind of it just passed into history and didn't think much about it. Obviously, I didn't show it to many people because now, looking back at it, it's kind of embarrassing, all this alien stuff, hackers, aliens, you know, back then I thought that was an amazing thing. But, you know, it just passed into history. And then, I don't know if has anyone seen this show? I'm not someone to plug TV shows, but this is a really cool TV show about a computer hacker. Because it tells truths about the way that developers think and hackers work. But there was one particular episode where this guy was talking about how he learned to code and how he learned to make websites, things like that. And I saw him go to this site that I built back then and do view source. So he was viewing source on this site, and it made me think, you know, this is, you know, crazy. That thing was just some site that was up there, and it didn't really matter to anyone, maybe back then, but it just passed into history. But it stuck in someone's mind, and then it came back to me through this TV show. You know, and this is what I'm talking about. It's like just getting stuff out there, even stuff like that design that I put up there. It has these unexpected effects that ripple out through the world, and I really hope that you guys can feel that same kind of energy. So there's another thing that I saw that was interesting a couple of weeks ago related to all of this. This is the CEO of GitHub, who I know from the Ruby community way back, who had worked on maybe 20 other apps before working at GitHub. He worked on one for emailing your family, pastebin, social networking sites, wikis. But all of that experience, all that hacking and experimenting was valuable when they started building GitHub. Now, all of this experience was extremely useful because they could build servers, they could hack around at low level, on the web, and mobile. All of this experience that just seemed like maybe not directly related to the work they were doing at the time. All of it was what made GitHub possible and made our social code revolution possible today. So another great example of how important experimentation and play is. So I really wanted to just say that all of us are responsible for making our community better. We all have a shared responsibility in this. Whether or not we consume or produce, we're all responsible at some point to contribute. And I think this is something that maybe it seems like I'm preaching to the open source choir, but I know there's a lot of people out there who have these ideas, but they don't get them out there. And I just want you to get them out there. If you're excited about React Native, please come talk to me or anyone else on the React Native team and talk to us about this and help us out with these kinds of tools and make them better. I just want to thank these guys, the team that kind of rallied around the site and built it up. And now I just want to go to some questions because I think it's important that you talk to me and we have a little discussion. So check out the React Native Playground here, my site, and our feedback product. So let's see the questions. Can we use the mobile stimuli on the web to run code from localhost? Not how we have it set up today, but it is certainly possible. There's tools like AnyRock, another really cool hacker tool, which has, for us and for developing this, has been extremely useful. This is, by the way, I just should have mentioned this, the React Native Playground, the entire source code base is open source. It's a Rails application fronted by React, and there's some other funky stuff in there, some Docker containers for running the node servers. And yeah, we can use, if you run it on localhost, you can use that now to do that. You can actually run the entire playground there and point the simulator to your ngrok, which is a tool for tunneling traffic into your local machine. But that's something we'd like to support in the future on the site as well. Does Apple still discourage apps that load bundles dynamically from a server? Actually, this hasn't been a problem at all. There's some 30-something apps, I think, on the App Store now, and quite a few of them, and big ones as well, are using various services to push code down, and they're doing it now, and it's happening, and it hasn't been a problem for anyone, and probably something that will prove that this is going to be a long-term viable solution, and it's not going to be cut off by Apple, is that Microsoft just released a tool that does this as well. So Microsoft is offering a free, what would we call it? I don't know what we call it. It's a command line tool and a server backend. So basically it's a deployment environment where you can push your code up to their servers and it will update your app automatically. So this is already happening out there, and I just see that the future is going to be more and more stuff like this. So I don't think this should be a concern for you today if you're relying on this. Also a really amazing thing that we can do with React Native. It's possible to use installable NPM dependencies in Playground. Good question, something I forgot to mention. We sort of have a semi-experimental but working feature where you can actually push a Git repository right up to the Playground. We'll install your NPM dependencies for you, and your app will be running there. So like the app that you saw just before with the game, that app is actually a Git repository with, you could see there were quite a lot of files up there. So that was pushed up, and you can just push changes and they'll get updated on the site. So yes, you can install dependencies as long as they don't contain any native code, which would have to be compiled into the iOS or Android app. Of course, that's something we'd love to also support in the future, is doing custom builds of those kinds for more complicated apps. But today, as long as your NPM dependencies are just JavaScript based, they will work. How do you manage to run iOS and Android simulators at scale? Since we're not actually managing that, and up till now, the great guys at appetize.io have let us run this at the scale that we have, which I think for them is actually pretty small. They have quite a lot of big customers running on their servers, and they have multiple data centers all over the world. So right now, scale is not an issue for us, but for them, it's a good question and something that I want to talk to them more about and find out how does that really work? You know, how is it possible you can have these simulators running on these servers and run them at scale? But it's a good question. I will find out more about that. Does ArnPlay support hot reloading? So what it's doing now is a live reload, which is just reloading the JavaScript, the entire app. Hot reloading, I think, is what you're referring to here, is reloading like hot reloading on React Web. As long as your JavaScript environment supports it. Right now we don't support it because we're not running. You have to run Webpack, which is the only environment right now that supports the hot reloading of that kind. So we would have to run a Webpack server. We don't support that today, but that's certainly something good in the future once we're able to run something other than the default React Native packages, which is what we run today. So it's something we could definitely support, but we're not quite there yet. Windows Phone support. No plans, because Appetize.io doesn't support it, and those are the guys who gave us that. But if somebody builds a Windows Phone simulator, then yeah, why not? But of course, React Native is going to have to support it. Windows phones, I think, are able to run Android apps now, so there's a possibility that could be supported on the Playground at some point. Are the native modules disappeared? Do you have plans to monetize this? Not the Playground itself, because I think it's really important that tools like that are always free, and always out there, because the things we get back from the people that use it is much more valuable than what we could monetize off of this platform in particular. What we are doing is monetizing the feedback platform that I showed you a little demo of. If you go to reploy.io, you can sign up for a beta, which hopefully we'll have out soon. What we're hoping is take the ideas from the playground, perfect them in that environment, and then bring some of those back so we can do things like custom iOS builds in the playground. Are the native modules conceptually similar to Cordova plugins in a sense? An app talks to device via JavaScript native bridge. Think about that for a second. Yes, they're conceptually similar. The interface is quite different, and in my opinion, it's much cleaner. I never done iOS programming. I was working with Ruby Motion before coming to React Native. So I understood the API, but I hadn't worked with Objective-C. And in writing, I had to write a module for audio recording, and I found it quite simple. There's some great examples from Brent, which really helped me out. But the environment itself is a very small and very clear API, really well documented on how to work with this bridge. So yeah, the concept is similar, but the interface is, I think, very superior. Is it possible to embed a Playground app in a website? Certainly possible, but we're not sure yet if that's something we can support, because we have to be careful with the usage numbers we have from Appetize. So it's something we're talking to them about to figure out what kind of usage we could allow, because maybe we don't want to have product demos, things like that. But for open source, I think that's definitely what we would like to support. For example, some people who are doing examples on the site want to blog. They want to post it on their blog, which makes perfect sense, where they're explaining what they're building up there. So hopefully we'll be able to support that soon. So 1 minute. Can I run Cycle.js apps? I have no idea. So I don't know. Maybe Brent can answer that question. Brent says yes, so yes, you can. Is it possible to use it seamlessly with Kerberos protected APIs? Also have no idea at all about that, but in general, anything you can do with React Native, you can do here. So thank you very much.